Hi everyone, welcome back to my next video. This is going to be sort of a continuation from my last video. So you could get a prequel of what precipitated me leaving my 30-year relationship and how I'm surviving that in the last 5 years. But let me just recap a little bit of what happened last time. So we went into bankruptcy. We were evicted from our home. I had to put our cat to sleep on my birthday all alone, and this all happened in 2018. So then we were basically homeless, living in hotels on points, all right, and then we were going to figure out what we were going to do. So we stayed at friends' homes a couple of weeks in New Hampshire, went down to Maryland to visit friends, and then went to Denver to see our daughter who was in college, and we stayed with her for 2 weeks. We did manage to get an apartment in Florida, and we were headed to Florida and driving across the country. We were in Nashville, and I received a call from my mother, and she had told me that my father had fallen and broken his hip. He was 86 at the time, and he had had surgery and didn't do well. We immediately packed up the dogs and packed up the car and started driving to Florida, which was monotonous because it was at the end of March and spring break and pouring rain the entire drive there. We basically crawled there. It was quite challenging and a little frustrating on my part. I mean, every time I spoke to my mother, my father wasn't doing well. So I just want to race there and get by his side, and hopefully he wouldn't die before I get there, or I didn't know what to think. So, well, I was thinking what else could go wrong in my life since everything just went wrong, but it gets worse. Yeah. So then we arrived in Florida, and I arrived at the hospital that he was staying in, that he just had his surgery in. They were living in Stuart, Florida. And I walk into the room, and my father lights up when he sees me. He's so happy to see me, and I am so happy to see him. I will never forget the reaction we had when we saw each other. I could cry now, but I won't. I'll cry probably at the end. And so it was very difficult and challenging. He actually had a few months earlier an incident at the senior center in his hometown where a man punched him in the throat because he thought he had his walker. Yes. And so my father was in the hospital for a few days with that because he almost broke my father's larynx. And so he had issues already. And his throat really kind of never was the same. His voice was not the same. His throat was still always a little swollen. So after the surgery, his neck and his throat were all swollen like a basketball. It was huge. And it was heart-wrenching for me because my father was speaking like he mentally knew what the words were coming out of his mouth. He also was suffering from a little dementia and Alzheimer's, and he was completely incoherent. So what came out of his mouth was just blabbing and gibberish, but to his mind, he was speaking coherently to me. I just, of course, nodded and smiled, and I just pretended that I knew what he was talking about, and I was trying to also hold back my tears because of the state my father was in. It was heart-wrenching for me to watch this, and I just tried to go with whatever he said and tried to make the best of it. But my heart just sank when I saw him. It was just heart-wrenching for me, and just, it was a lot. And I was also emotional and depressed at the time, so seeing my father the way he was triggered me also, just so emotionally and draining. So my ex and I managed to get into a hotel with our 2 dogs in tow, as usual. And we were not going to be able to be in our apartment for another couple days. It was not the first yet. So just trying to keep myself together. The next day we get up, and we're exhausted from driving in pouring rain, 2 dogs, my father in the hospital. Get up and get to the hospital, and my father's sleeping. And my sister just walks up to me that they were putting my father into hospice. And my first reaction was, oh no. But I really think, and I hate saying this, but I really think that my sister and my mother kind of sort of planned all this. They made sure I did not speak to any medical professional whatsoever. They kind of like pre-planned all this in a way. They didn't consult me or include me in any of their deliberations on what they were doing. In this world, I hate to say, but when you lose your money, you lose your power, because money is power. And let me just tell you a little bit about my sister, because she's a little bit of unkind to me most of the time. And she was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, by herself. She kind of left the family when she was 19 years old. She left the family for 40 years and came back only when my parents sent her a check to come to visit. And she was really not involved with the family. It was just my brother and I. My brother was mentally challenged, so by default, I was the matriarch of the family. It's not that I wanted to be, but by default, I became the matriarch of the family. I didn't want it, but I was the one looking after my parents for many years. And so my sister then was living in Albuquerque at the time, and she was swindled out of her home. She owned a trailer home, and she sold it, and she let the people move in when they only paid 50% down payment, and then they didn't pay her the rest of the money. So my sister did what a lot of people in their 60s or 70s do. They're homeless, they don't have a place to live, and they go back and they live with their parents, masking it as I'm taking care of mom and dad. So that's what my sister did. So she moved in, she got power of attorney, she kind of hoodwinked my parents, and because I was in my own crisis at the moment, I was powerless. I was trying to pull my own life together, and they kind of like didn't pay attention to me. Nobody called me and asked me how I was or how my life was. So my sister kind of like took control of everything. I was devastated, and because I was in trauma, in shock, I didn't counteract anything because I was numb. I didn't know how to do anything at that moment. I was completely in shock and trauma, and so I was shocked that they weren't even trying healing and rehabilitation. It was like, no, we're going to just put him in hospice. And I was very weak. I normally would have fought for something like for my father's life, but I was powerless at the time because I was so depressed and in the abyss of pain and agony at the time. My life had fallen apart, and I lost everything. And so it was really hard, very difficult. And so I understood basically what they were doing. They were basically going to methodically euthanize my father. But they had made all their plans. I never spoke to a doctor or a nurse or any health official and to discuss the situation. No one talked to me. I'm sure my sister and my mother made sure no one spoke to me, because I would have fought for my father's life. I really loved my father more than anyone in my whole family. And I think my mother and sister just wanted him pushed aside. So they had their plans. And I'm only saying this because of what they did afterwards, after he passed away. So the ambulance came, and I followed it to the hospice, and we got my father settled. And I was not going to leave my father's side. Because at this point, I did not trust the two of them. But did I speak to a doctor? No, never spoke to a doctor or a nurse or anyone. I think they just methodically just pumped him up with morphine and slowly killed him. I do. And I then was with my father at his bedside. And he got to hospice about 6:30 at night. And my husband was bringing me food. And our dogs were completely in tow with us again. We could not leave them in a hotel. So the hospice was nice enough to let her dogs have their beds on the floor and sleep on the floor in the same room I was with my father, which was very kind of them, because we did not have an apartment yet. It was just like a day or two away. So it was the hardest night of my life. So my sister and my mother came, and to my surprise, they both left. My brother was nowhere to be found, and my sister, my mother left. I was there alone, which was completely in shock. And I'm like, well, where are you going? Well, my mother wanted to claim that she was just getting over pneumonia. Yes, she did, but that was like 4 months ago, 4 or 5 months earlier. My sister claiming she's exhausted. But this man is dying, and they're leaving. They basically, I feel they did their dirty work, and they were leaving it up to me to finish their dirty work, to clean it up. And my father, I mean, I just can't believe they abandoned a human being who was crossing over. But I know it was complete guilt on their part. And they just wanted him gone. They just wanted him gone. So I was the one who was there all night holding my father's hands and trying to help him cross over. And I just prayed to God and Jesus' angels, please give me the strength to do this. And I know God and Jesus was with me, holding my hand. I read the Bible first to my father. And then my guides told me and told me to download Glenn Campbell music. Because when I was a child, my father and I used to love to watch the Glenn Campbell show together. We used to watch Hee Haw and then the Glenn Campbell show, and we loved it. And we had that in common. My father and I loved Glenn Campbell. His show was terrific. And so I was up, and I remember my father owned also Glenn Campbell albums when I was a child. So I was up all night with him and singing Glenn Campbell songs to him from my phone. And it was one of the hardest things I've had to do in my life. So I sat up all night with him alone. And then around 8 o'clock in the morning, my father was still alive. And I called my mother and my brother and my sister and said, hey, if you want to come back and say goodbye to Dad one more time, he's still alive. Well, that was horrific too. That was horrific. Here I am thinking in my mind, we're going to have this whole kumbaya moment together and come and embrace each other and love and joy that we're celebrating this man's life. Couldn't be further than what happened, what transpired. Oh my God. It was like a movie. And it's surreal at this point in my life. So my mother and my sister come back, and we are desperately also waiting for my two uncles who are coming over from the west coast of Florida to arrive. So my father was one of 4 brothers, and the 2 younger brothers, my father was number 2 in the lineup, and his 2 younger brothers were coming over to hopefully see him before he passes. So we're waiting for them also. My mother and my sister arrive, and I did say, where is my brother? And they said he's coming too. So My father's not dead yet, but they come for like 15 minutes and they go again. Everyone goes. But first, I had to have a fight with my mother because I asked her where my brother was, and then she started arguing with me that I was mad at him, which I wasn't. I hadn't spoken to my brother for about a year, or he was mad at me for probably something that had to do with our bankruptcy. But that's in another one, another video on part of that. And so all of them just came for like 15 minutes. And then they left again. Where are they going? My father is dying. Where are they going? They live in the same town. Where can they be going? And so I was up all night with my dad, and the box of tissues, oddly enough, in hospitals, of course, are like sandpaper on your nose. So I had developed this big red sore nose because I was crying all night long. So my husband came in and I said, "Hey, would you mind going down to the drugstore down the street and get me the lotion tissues that would be softer on my nose?" And he said, "Sure." And he came in and we put the two dogs in their beds because he slept that night in the hotel with the dogs. And so the dogs are laying there in their little beds, and my ex went to the drugstore for my tissues. And it was at that moment that my dad took his last breath, with me holding his hand. And he took his last breath, and he went to God. He went to God at that time. And I feel very honored that he gave that to me. He gave me the honor of his last breath, and I will never forget that, because everyone was there. My uncles weren't there yet, but I was there alone with him, and it was an honor that he took his last breath with me. And my Italian father, who had a very hard life, his mother died at 8 years old, and he was raised in an orphanage in New Jersey. And he tried the best he could. He tried the best he could. And, excuse me. And I loved him. And I just feel my family didn't really love him. They wanted him out of the way. And so it was very difficult. My uncles finally got there, and they were really sad that they weren't there when he took his last breath. But it was just the way it was supposed to be. And oddly enough, my uncles were driving across Florida. They saw a little forest fire on the highway. My uncle had a case of water in the back of his trunk, and they put out a forest fire. Yep, they put out a forest fire. So I think it was God and Jesus just stalling them out, so I had my moment alone with my dad. And it was very, very hard, but I got through it. And so I called my mother and my sister to come back, and it was over. And my brother comes back too. My brother spends a whole 15 minutes, but I understand my brother could not emotionally handle it. He is emotionally challenged because he's mentally challenged. My brother has brain damage. He was not born with brain damage, but he got brain damage when he was a child because he fell and he had a concussion in the same spot of his head. So he has the mentality of basically an 8th or 9th grader. And so emotionally, he was not able to handle this. So my sister and my mother come back. They return. And excuse me, sip of tea. So my mother sits next to me, next to my dad's body, and she starts arguing with him. She starts yelling at him and arguing with him, which would be the normal thing. My mother is a crazy Irish redhead woman, an insane person, and she starts arguing and yelling at him, which, like, like, and I'm like holding her arm and just saying, Mom, Mom, and tapping her, say, it's over. He can't hear you. It's done. I just think you need to just let it go. Let it go. And so she does. And my sister, my mother are gone like in like 5 or 10 minutes. Oh, my uncle and aunt got there. They said hello to them and they left. They just left everything up to me, signing all, the documents and everything. Oh, no, they wouldn't let me sign the documents because I didn't have signing power because my sister took power of everything. So what? I don't care. So I went home. Now, before, when I was visiting my girlfriend in Maryland, before I left there, she gave me a joint and she gave me some little liquor bottles and she said, here, you may need these. And so my ex and I are driving to the hotel with the dogs. Oh no, we were in the apartment by then. I think it was like the first night we were in the apartment. And we're driving back, and our apartment was only about 40 minutes from my parents' home. And we're driving back, and I said to my ex, I have a joint at home, and I'm going to smoke it, and I don't want to hear anything from you. Because he was not a pot smoker. And I'm not a pot smoker myself either. It's just the stress. I needed something just for the stress. I don't really smoke weed. And so I get back. Yeah, that episode of my father dying was just surreal. I didn't know what had hit me. So I smoked this joint, and we get home, and I'm just like, what happened? Like what just happened? I was like in shock, and I guess I was in so much pain I didn't know how to feel at the time. So I pull out my laptop and I said to my ex, let me just check my emails real quick and email a few people and let people know that my father had passed. And so oddly enough, I remember when he was passing, I was playing his favorite song, Wichita Lineman, of course, from Glenn Campbell. He loved that song. And I love it too. Who doesn't love it? It's a great song. And so I played that so many times through the night. Now we get home and I have my computer out and I said to my ex, hey, let's see if that episode of Roseanne is on that everybody's talking about, how she's making this comeback and everything. And let's just check it out because I just want to distract myself. So we missed that show. And the next show on is The Middle. And I love The Middle. I had kids around the same age. I love Patricia Heaton because she reminded me of a friend of mine. And it was a great show for people who had kids around my age. And so I sat there with my computer and I watched the show a little bit here and there. I'm really just checking out my emails. But then at the end of the show, which was a shock to me, but the end of the show, they played Glenn Campbell, Wichita Lineman. And then next thing I know, streams are coming down my face because it was my dad. I know it was my dad saying, hey, I'm okay. I'm doing okay. And I think it was also like saying, hey, thanks for being there for me and getting me through a rough night and get me to the other side. And I knew at that moment that my soul was really sent to this family to help heal my father. My father was a very damaged child. He lost his mother when he was 8 years old. My grandmother was Scottish, and he and his brothers were then placed in an orphanage. And it was very cold. My grandfather, Rocco, yes, Rocco, love that name, Rocco. It is a great name. It's a cool name. Anyway, Rocco had 6 brothers and sisters, and why they didn't divvy up the boys, I don't know why. It is speculation, but my grandfather could not take care of 4 boys in the 1930s by himself. That would be impossible for any man today also. 4 boys. And my grandfather was not an easy man. He, very cold. I mean, he was kind to me and the grandkids and everybody, but he really didn't know how to take care of 4 boys. So my father told me that one day my grandfather said to the 4 boys, "Hey, I want to check out this hotel and see what you think about it." So the orphanage was Sacred Heart in Jersey City. And he brings the boys to the orphanage, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to go out and get an ice cream cone for you guys, and I'll be right back." And he disappeared, and my grandfather doesn't come back for another 2 years. So they had to deal with abandonment from their father, the death of their mother, and then placed in an orphanage. And the boys, though, did summer with the aunts of my grandfather. So they did have that, respite from being with the nuns. So my father was a wounded child, and it was very hard for him. He met my mother. They got pregnant, and he had to go off to the Korean War, and she had to have this child alone. So it was no picnic for either one of them, because this was 1953, and this is what you had to do. You had to get married. And so my father had passed, and I was, of course, completely numb and didn't know what to think or feel. I had really settled into the abyss of despair, and I felt like, gee, my life is really over. My life is truly over. I don't know how I can come back from this all in a matter of a few months. So in February, we were evicted, had my cat put to sleep. Then in April, my father passed away, and we lost everything. We lost everything. So I will end it here. I wish you all the best. And I know I'm not alone with the things that I've been through. I know there are other people out there like you who have been through the same or worse than I have. And I wish you all love. I wish you peace. And I will not let all these events that destroyed my life define who I am. I am now on a different journey. I am now on a spiritual journey and making myself whole again. I'm sharing my story because I want others to know you are not alone. There are others who have gone through tragedies in their life. Tragedy is something that tests us, and we either go through tragedy in the beginning, middle, or the end of our life. And it's really just testing our resolve. I will not let this define who I am. I want to be the author of my own story, and I will survive this. And I hope you come on the journey with me. This is just the beginning of when I left. I've been away from my ex for about 5 years. So I love you all, and I hope to see you again here soon. Bye.